Hello, Priscilla and Christine. I know this is not the same thing as being in person, but I thought it would be fun to make a small video for the Tapestry project because the color shows up better and it's a little bit easier to explain the stitches this way. This was my first time making a tapestry and I found it very relaxing, as Angel mentioned in many of our Zoom classes. The concept I had in mind was a waterfall because I love driving to the mountains and hiking. So I guess you could say that one of my happy places is a waterfall. And that's what I drew inspiration from. I did make a cartoon, but not so much for sticking to, more of kind of seeing how the materials, textures, colors that we were given come together. I also used some yarn from my personal stash because we all know if you're a knitter or crocheter, you have a lot of yarn that you don't know what to do with yet. So this was the perfect time to use up some of that yarn. All right, so this is my tapestry. I began with a kind of textured brown to represent the mud and rocks and water at the bottom of a waterfall. And then for the trees, I did the triangle patterns going up. And there's one tree that I used the cool textured yarn with ribbon mixed in that Christine included in our kit. And then on the other side, I did the same thing, so there's some balance in the tapestry. And immediately when I saw all the fringe in the videos and the examples of the tapestries, it made me think rushing water. And when you lift the rushing water, you see reflections. This is a gradient yarn that I used to weave in the middle. So it's like a mixture of dark grays, light grays, and whites. And then I used a brighter blue kind of to show reflection. And I initially wasn't planning on making this as a mountain. I only wanted to do the waterfall, but it ended up being a mountain because I kind of just free-handed it as I went along. Even though I made the cartoon, I didn't really necessarily stick to it. It was more as I went along what would look good for the next step. And so it turned into a mountain with a waterfall. And then if you take a closer look, there's brown on the side with the green for trees, and then the rocks that you usually see behind the waterfall. And then this little section here and this section up here, I actually held two really thin yarns together and weaved those to make them thicker. And then this is a chunkier yarn. So I did include all of the aspects that Priscilla mentioned during class. For one, the raya knots for the fringe. And then for the trees, I thought it would be cool to include the slit knots because it's kind of, when you look through trees, you can see through them. So I thought that was the perfect place to incorporate the slit technique. And then for the interlocking methods, I tried both styles. The first one was the common warp, which is I did between the waterfall and the rock background. So that is interlocking common warp. And then in the mountain in the sky is where I tried doing the common weft, which at first I didn't really love the effect, but then it grew on me because it's kind of like when you go skiing and then the snow kind of just drifts, so it has that smoky effect. So I thought that was cool in combination with the sky and mountain. That adds another element to the mountain because it looks snowy. And on the back, I weaved in the tails and then trimmed them. And to finish the piece, I tied the bottoms and then I weaved them into the piece so that they're more clean. I didn't really want the white tails hanging, so I weaved them back into the piece. And then for the top, I just tied knots and then I put it on this is actually a chopstick, and tied a piece of yarn for a wall hanging. I put a lot of thought into each step as I went along, especially what it had to do with the different levels of the waterfall. From the bottom where the brown thread is, there's some other, I don't know what to call that, but it gives it a heathered look with the extra texture in that yarn to represent the sand and the rocks at the bottom of the waterfall. And then I love how the waterfall with the gradient yarn kind of reflects when a waterfall is over the rock background, so it incorporates all of those colors. And I love how this turquoise color kind of breaks up all of that grayness. And I really get the effect of rushing water. I would say this tree part here was kind of getting out of my comfort zone, because I could have just did all of these the same green yarn, the evergreen yarn, but then I really wanted to add something interesting and use that cool yarn that Christine included in the kits. So yeah, that is my tapestry.